Good. So today we're really pleased to be joined by Sam Long, an Oxford United footballer who will introduce himself very shortly. Sam, good to have you on today.
No, thanks for having me. Obviously, I got the message a couple of weeks ago about joining, and I was really excited to be able to jump on and hopefully help as many people as I can.
Thank you, Sam. And this is all part of the Abingdon Bridge. We're a charity set up in Abingdon that serves the whole of the South Vale, and we support young people aged 13 to 25, so a lot of young adults too, on well-being and mental health. So feels like a really important topic at the minute, and it'd be great to sort of talk to you, a pro footballer, a little bit about how you manage the stresses of life and mental health within footballers that you're going to obviously be around and associated with. So we're really sort of pleased to have you on today, and it's all part of our tab talks and talking about the important stuff. So thank you for that. So Sam, this is a good time to interview a footballer after a 6-0 win.
I know. I mean, we had such a disappointing result the week before against Accrington, and we felt we really let ourselves down, and we knew we had to respond in a positive way, and thankfully we did. I mean, the first 30 minutes was quite a tight affair. It could have gone either way. They had a few chances, but I think we were quite ruthless in the end with our chances and managed to obviously win 6-0, which don't come around very often.
Tell me a little bit about, because I'm fascinated, tell me a little bit about after you've had a disappointing result, I guess you get into a changing room. What's the sort of mood like after a loss? What's the gaffer like? How are you feeling as an individual?
Obviously, as an individual, I'm always either angry, upset. You go through waves of emotion, but it does vary sometimes, especially from the gaffer's side, because sometimes you can play well and just get unlucky and lose the game on real fine margin. But I mean, especially the Accrington game, I'd say we're quite angry and disappointed in ourselves because we conceded 2 sloppy goals, and we knew we should have been better in certain times in the game, and we felt like we let ourselves down. And obviously, being a business end of the season, you need to win as many games as you can, especially as we're chasing. Do you know what I mean? So we were really disappointed, but overall, it does change. You can come off the pitch thinking, well, we were so good today, but the luck didn't go quite our way. But then you can come off and thinking we were so poor and end up winning a game. So football's such a strange game in that sense, and you've always got to stay level-headed because there's always a game around the corner as well. So you can't get too high or too low.
That makes a lot of sense to me. So essentially, when you have a disappointing defeat, it's about being pragmatic, looking at what happened, the fine margins, and then looking at the next game, looking at the next obstacle in life, so to speak.
Absolutely. I mean, we always do analysis on the things that we could have done better in the game to prevent obviously goals going in, or opposite way, like how we could have scored a goal. And that's something that we've got a really good team at Oxford that spend hours and hours behind the scenes looking at different teams and on their strengths and weaknesses. And obviously we don't see that. We only see like the finished article, like the 2-3 minute segments step by step that they show us, but they sit there for hours and hours and watch games, and it's testament to them really, because they must sit through 4 or 5 games every week on the team we're playing on the Tuesday or the Saturday, and bring up their strengths, their weaknesses, so it makes us as easy for us as possible. And sometimes you do feel that you let them sort of people down, because if you've lost the game, it's like they spent all that time for nothing, especially if you go out there and you don't do the things that they've told you to do. And that sometimes can be like, could we should have done that better, or we should have done that differently, because they've told us and we haven't taken it on board. But No, definitely. Like I said, you can't get too high or too low in football because there's games come thick and fast, and especially this year, it's been Saturday, Tuesday for God knows how long now. I know at the start of the year there was a lot of games getting called off because of COVID and because of different teams getting cases like within a few days of playing us. I know we had a few games called off on the day, which doesn't really happen in professional football.
I can imagine it's been a real sort of uncertain season, uncertain time for players and everyone involved in football. And people have been watching this, Sam, young people, parents, just normal adults who might struggle with anxiety, might struggle with uncertainty and whatever else that might bring. Ability that you're part of something, you're part of a community. Normally you have several thousand fans.
You broke up there a little bit.
Did you? Should I just repeat what I said?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Right, we'll keep rolling, Sam. So I sort of said, how does a professional footballer deal with the pressure and the uncertainty of being a footballer and what that brings? Because we're going to have a lot of people watching this who we all deal with anxiety, right? It's a normal feeling. But how do professional footballers, how do you individually sort of deal with the pressures that brings?
I think experience is probably the biggest factor. You learn different ways to make to make it work for you. Different people are so different. Everyone's so different. So say like one person could, I don't know, meditate. There's a few lads that meditate and like to do that and take the stresses away from that. Or some people like to go for walks and stuff like that. But I don't know. I think experience is the big one where you learn what works for you. But I think with Oxford, especially at Oxford, we've got people like Gary Bloom, who's obviously a well-known person in the community, that comes in and chats to us, and he's always there at the end of the phone if you need a chat. And obviously he's the club psych, and he looks after us in that sense. And also the manager, he looks after the boys, where he's very approachable. And I think his missus, she runs her own organisation on mental health and got her own practices that she does. And I think if you are struggling a lot away from the place as well, I think the pressure of football can get too much sometimes. And just talking to people, I think talking to them people and the resources that we have is so important especially for young people, because especially nowadays where they might feel like they'll be judged and looked at differently if they do approach them sort of people. But I think it's important now more than ever, especially with the times we're going through, to talk to people. And if you get that chance to let things off and say the things that are bothering you, then I think it's really important.
Yeah. Thanks, Sam. And I think that's certainly important for both young men and women. But obviously, we know young men sometimes really struggle to open up and talk about their vulnerabilities. And I guess as a footballer too, you want to be coming across as strong and with it and showing the gaffer that you're handling it. And I can imagine at times that you don't know if you're going to be picked one week. You don't know about contract extensions. I imagine that brings up a lot of sort of anxiety and uncertainty too.
Absolutely. I mean, perfect example for me, I'll use myself an example here. When the lockdown hit last year, I had 3 months left of my contract, 4 months left of my contract, going into the last part of the season. And then obviously the season got cut short, as obviously everybody knows. And it was a really uncertain time for myself and my girlfriend, as we were looking to move out, looking to buy a house. And it was very, very stressful for us, where there was the weeks and the months like dwindling down to the end of my contract. And obviously then news broke that we were going to be in the playoffs and stuff like that. And I didn't know if I could be involved with that. But yeah, the uncertain times of that was really stressful for me. And obviously I ended up signing a contract in the end of a 2-year contract. And funny, as we speak, it's been announced today I've signed another new contract, which is obviously,
Congratulations,
yeah,
Sam.
perfect for me. But it's just this, trying to stay positive in them times was really difficult. And it was getting to the point where I didn't know if I was going to have a club for the next season. I didn't know if I was going to be involved in the playoffs, and it was really, really tough. And at that time, I didn't know what to do. And obviously, that's why you've got the people around you, and having talks with my girlfriend, my family, my mum and dad. It really helped in the sense of trying to get the ball rolling of what I wanted to do and needed to do to then obviously secure the contract that I ended up getting. But yeah, I think the uncertain times is affected everybody in so many different ways. Obviously, losing their job, losing money in, if that's furlough or they're a business they've just started. I know a lot of people, a few people actually, who just before lockdown started businesses of their own, and they ended up really, really struggling because obviously they couldn't predict what was going to happen. And
No, you're absolutely right, Sam. And I think that it's really nice to hear you say that, because there'll be a lot of people watching this who think professional footballer, Instagram, got everything that you want. And actually, the reality is everybody has uncertainty in life. And there's a lot of young people now who are uncertain about their futures. They don't know about their grades. They don't know about what their jobs look like come September if they do leave school. And there's a lot of sort of uncertainty. And it sounds like the way you deal with it is by talking to the people you trust around you and focusing on the things that you can control.
absolutely. And that's the biggest thing. That's the nail on the head for me, is control the controllables, and everything else will sort themselves out, or it will run its course. What you can only do what you can do, and what you can't affect, you can't affect. And that's something that everyone entails and comes across in their life. I mean, I know when I finish football, I've got the worry of what to do next, because what people, they know, but they probably don't know to a certain extent, is especially players in the leagues that I play in, like League One, League Two, maybe even low Championship, they don't earn obviously like the money the guys in the Premiership do, and they have to find careers or jobs after football. And I think especially within young footballers and, well, footballers in general, it's quite a tough subject to talk about, is life after football. Yeah. Because a lot of people don't know what they want to do in the first instance, and how then to go about it. And it's something that I'm going through myself at the moment. There is platforms now out there for me to use, but I mean 5-10 years ago that there wasn't them sort of platforms out there. And now obviously it's a lot better with them sort of platforms being put out there for young professionals in every sport really. But no, I think you've always got to, I don't know, have a plan. But it's funny because nothing ever goes to plan, or very rarely goes to plan. You've always got to adapt. And I think that's the biggest message I'd say. Like, you just got to roll with the punches, kind of expect the unexpected, and just enjoy what you can as much as you can.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is going to ring true to a lot of people watching this, because what you're talking about is being able to adapt to change, adapt to the situation you're in. But when you're in your present moment, enjoy it. Like, enjoy being a professional footballer now, but you're also astute enough to know that there's life after football. So it's starting to think about how how that maps out. And I can imagine, Sam, that there's a lot of young footballers who get into this, you know, League Two, League One, think they've made it, a footballer, go and buy a nice motor, do you know what I mean? Get the girlfriends or whatever they want, spend the money on nice clothes, and then realise how sort of short the career can be, and they might get dropped one week, and it's quite a fall, isn't it? If you fall out of I guess of a lower league team, it's quite a drop to where you could be. So I can imagine that pressure to always achieve and to feel secure is immense.
Absolutely. I think definitely the security in football, especially in the lower leagues, is massive. I mean, you don't see many long-term contracts on big money unless you get the odd one where big players have dropped down and they're on bigger deals and stuff like that. But the security is the biggest word really when it comes to lower league football, because you got to think of mortgages, you got to think of when you want to start a family, when you've got families and you've got to look after them. And if you haven't got that security and you don't know where you're going to be, it's like I refer back to when I was in lockdown, didn't know where I was going to be, didn't know if I was going to get another contract or not. I could have been sat in lockdown one day, come out of lockdown, and I could have been going up the other end of the country trying to get a contract with a different club. And the uncertainty in football, especially in the leagues 1 and 2 and National League as well, is tough at times. And like you say, the security is a big thing in football, and I think that's what a lot of players do aim to and push to get.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. One more question about football, and then I'll just talk a little bit about the bridge again. What would you be doing if you wasn't a professional footballer?
That's the perfect question. I have no idea. I'm the perfect example of a young lad who loved football and put all of his eggs in one basket and was lucky enough to make it in the game and have a career in the game. And this is where the next few years I will be looking what next before it's too late, because I know a lot of professionals know in the back of their mind they have to think about what's next, but leave it so late that they get to the end of their careers and think, oh no, like I now got to go out and either get a degree or get some sort of like qualification to do the next step. And I think I have no idea. It's a perfect question. I have the conversation with my girlfriend all the time. I have no idea what I would be doing if I wasn't a football player.
Well, I'm pleased that you made the career and been successful in the career that you've always dreamed of doing it. And I've got no doubt, I appreciate how much work goes into achieving one's dreams. So fair play to you. So I've got 2 questions from young people who knew that we was interviewing you. And They've asked us to ask you 2 questions. Can I ask you them? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so this is clearly from an Oxford United fan. Who's the worst person to sit next to on the bus on the way home from an away game after a loss?
Oh, that's a tough question, because I can't say we're all very that good. I'd say I'm definitely up there.
So if I interviewed another Oxford United player, the answer would be Sam Long.
Could be me. Could be me. Probably Alex Rodriguez Gorin, the Spaniard.
Right.
He definitely dissects the game and gets very angry, and which is what I like. He's very passionate, and I've got a lot of time for Alex, and I love it how he wears his heart on his sleeve. But I would say probably Alex. Alex.
All right then. Well, there you go. We can pass that on. The last question, Sam, is obviously there's a young lad that sort of asked, what advice would you give to someone who is finding it really hard to adapt to whatever the new normal is? You know, adapt going back to school, adapt being seen again by all their friends, because so many people we work with, Alex, have found it, lockdown has just been a time where they've just isolated themselves.
Yeah.
And now that the world's opening up again, they're expected to go back to school, they're expected to go back to work, and they're struggling. What advice would you give to somebody?
I would probably say, if you have the friends around you, speak to your friends, because I would guarantee you that they're probably feeling exactly the same way. They're probably feeling like they're scared, they're worried, they're struggling to adapt back into normality. They don't know how to act around certain situations, obviously after the pandemic or during the pandemic. Would be just to speak to your friends and see what they think. I think talking is such a massive thing that we don't do. Not enough people talk to each other and communicate on a level where they're honest. I think everyone tries to hide the fact that everyone's got feelings and everyone feels different things, and that they've got to accept that they're not on their own if they're feeling like that. I guarantee you there'll be thousands of other kids feeling like that. And it's just about, I don't know, maybe just getting back to grips with things slowly. Maybe going out with a few friends before you go back to school. Or it's really difficult, because this is the first time any of us have ever experienced anything like this. So it's always tough to say, oh, you should do this, you should do that, because nobody really knows. But I would definitely say not to feel like you're the only one. I would definitely say that what you're feeling is normal, and I guarantee you there's other people feeling exactly the same.
Sam, thank you. I think that really rings true. And what you're saying is to know that you're not alone, to speak to people and take it at your own pace.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's amazing how many of us, me included, and most people I meet, how we try to portray to the world we're okay on one hand and sort of deny how we feel on another. And sometimes we can get caught on that, and it can get quite confusing.
Yeah.
Sam, you're an absolute legend. Have you got any questions to ask us before you go?
I'd like to know how long have you been doing this? Because obviously it's something that is, especially in football, the last few years has been a big talking point, mental health and well-being. But when I started in football, it was obviously what I would have been in the first team set up 8 years ago. And it was never something that you talk about would be your mental health. Just something, when did these sort of things come into place, and how did it start, where your charity that you've obviously set up, or that you work for, how did it come about?
Yeah. Well, I'm really lucky that I work for a charity that's been established for 25 years, and it's got an amazing bunch of trustees that ensure that it's here and the doors are open. I've personally worked in the field of sort of wellbeing and mental health for the last 17 years, struggled a lot as a youngster, and slowly wanted to take control and make a difference to other people's lives. And I went and worked as a youth worker for many years, and then trained as a psychotherapist myself more recently. And I think that you're absolutely right, Sam. Someone like you, who's clearly articulate, clearly passionate, clearly cares about people. If you ever want a placement, or you want to come and find out more about, working in the field of mental health and working with young people, we would love to have you. And I actually think there's a massive gap in football to actually support club. I know Gary does his bit with a sort of squad, and as a counsellor himself, but more holistic sort of well-being support around clubs, certainly with younger players coming through. And I actually feel there's a role for someone like you to sort of become a mentor for other younger professional footballers about what it entails, about the lack of uncertainty you alluded to earlier, about the sense of security and how that impacts the decisions we make. So, you know, you're always welcome here. If you're ever in Abingdon, come and say hello.
Yeah.
Maybe let's have another chat again one day, Sam, about
Absolutely.
you know, how we can sort of work together again.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love that.
Okay, mate, you're an absolute star.
No, more
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time.
more than welcome. It's my pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
Great. Holly, any questions?